Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. Today we're going to do a new video on the Miyoo Mini, and you've probably seen me do a video on these before. In fact, the Miyoo Mini is one of my favorite devices of this year. Now, I'm fully aware that it came out last year, but it got really good in 2022. And one of my favorite things to do with the Miyoo Mini is to tweak it, both on the software and hardware side. You've probably seen some software videos like with Onion OS or Mini UI. And when it comes to those hardware mods, I like to do things like try out different cases or maybe some new buttons and stickers. This case here is one of my favorites. This is a custom leather case that's available on Etsy, and as you can see, you can also get it personalized. So one of my favorite things is just this little personalized case. But in today's video, we're not going to do cases. Instead, we're going to mod the device itself, and I'll show you what I've done already. To start, I've added these nice custom PlayStation buttons from Sakura Retro Modding. These have a nice glossy feel to them and feel just like the original. On top of that, I've tested a couple different speaker upgrades, and I'll show you my results here in this video. And finally, on the back, we have some 3D printed back buttons. These are called the Better buttons for Miyoo Mini. And these are pretty neat and actually very easy to install. And so in this video here, we're going to do all three of those installations and show you the results. All told, I would say that none of these upgrades are actually necessary, but they are a lot of fun and they do add some personalization to the Miyoo Mini. And so if you already have one of these laying around and you want to make it more special than it already is, then this is the video for you. And so without any further delay, let's jump into it. Okay, we're going to start with the speaker upgrade first. I have two different speakers I want to test here on the sides, and then I'm going to keep my gray one here with the stock speaker so we can do a comparison. And we'll start with the speaker on the left here. This one is from a smartphone called the Redmi Note, and you can find these for super cheap on AliExpress. Mine was $4 including shipping. On the listing I'll have linked in the video description. You want to go for the 8th option here. So that's the first one we're going to test against the stock speaker. The next one is going to be this one here on the right. Now this one is from the Sony Xperia Z5 Compact Mini, and I have no idea what that phone looks like, but this is the speaker here. Now if you're in the United States, it is a little bit hard to find these. It's actually rare to find them shipping from the United States. What you will find are some generic speakers that are non-OEM, but in this case I've been told that the OEM speakers are the ones that sound the best. And so you may have to shell out as much as $20 altogether to get one of these speakers. And again, I'll have a link to the eBay search terms in the video description below. And yeah, like I mentioned, we're going to keep it stock with the one here in the center. So let's go ahead and do the one with the Redmi Note speaker first. Now to disassemble a Miyoo Mini, it's pretty easy. What you want to do is open up the battery cover, remove the battery here, and then you'll have 6 different Phillips head screws to remove. After that, you can just pull the case off. There are no clips or anything. And then I would recommend using some tweezers to remove this tape right here. Once you have the tape removed, you can flip open this little ribbon cable connector right here, and then unseat the ribbon cable. Once that's done, you want to remove the board. Now what I recommend doing here is pulling it from the left side so that you don't come in conflict with the volume wheel. And that's all there is when it comes to disassembly here. Next, I recommend using tweezers to remove the stock speaker. I usually go from the bottom up. And so now we're going to take out the Redmi Note speaker here. If you notice, one side has 2 little metal connectors. Those are the ones that need to go on the bottom. And when you add the speaker here, you just want to set it into place. You don't want to push on it too hard, because when we assemble everything again, it's going to put it in the exact spot it needs to be. Anyway, to assemble, it's pretty easy. We're going to take the PCB and put it in with the volume wheel first, and then we'll gently press it into place. From there, we can add the ribbon cable and snap it shut, add the tape, and then we can add the back casing, those 6 screws, and then the battery. And so there we go, 1 down, 1 to go. I'm just going to speed through the disassembly process here for the second Miyoo Mini because it's exactly the same. Now let's take a look at the stock speaker. It has these little wires that kind of stick out on the edges here, and one side is higher than the other. And when you get the Sony Xperia speaker, it's going to have that same kind of wiring. And so just like with the stock speaker, I'm going to make it so that the higher one is on the top again. And that's really it, same thing here. You don't want to press down too hard when you connect it. And so again, we're going to reassemble these, and then we're going to do a sound test next. We'll start with the stock speaker and then move our way up from there. Okay, and so in my unscientific testing right here, I think that there is very little difference between the stock speaker and the Redmi Note. If anything, I would say that the Redmi Note speaker is a little bit bassier and louder, but it's also lacking some of the detail in the higher end as well. It's a little bit more muffled or muted. Meanwhile, the Xperia one is definitely not as bassy, but feels less distorted as well. In addition, the definition in the mid-range and high end is a lot higher as well. And so in the end, I don't really see a reason to upgrade from the stock speaker to the Redmi Note. It seems very similar to me. But that Xperia one definitely has more definition to it, and so if you wanted to do an upgrade, that's the one I would recommend. Okay, and next we're going to change out the face buttons. To do this, we're going to use some parts from Sakura Retro Modding, and I will have it linked in the video description. Now they're selling this as an entire kit, so in addition to the buttons, you're going to get a bunch of stickers as well. And the price on these are pretty high because the process to make these buttons is incredibly intense. This shop will also periodically have upgraded buttons for the AYN Odin devices, and I picked up some of those at the same time. And so be on the lookout for a video for those buttons sometime in the future. Either way, let's go ahead and tackle the next stage of the project here. And like I mentioned, this comes with a full kit, including stickers for the face as well as on the back. And honestly, I'm not a huge sticker guy. I usually don't like putting them on the face of my devices, but the buttons themselves, those are the ones I'm interested in. And these buttons look a lot better than the typical 3D printed ones that I've seen from other shops, as well as even from Sakura Retro Modding. We'll get a closer look once I finish the installation. Additionally, the kit comes with a bunch of these stickers right here. I'll show you how to use these too. Anyway, as you can imagine, first thing we need to do is disassemble our Miyoo Mini. And so again, I'll speed through this process here. You've probably figured it out. Next, we're going to remove all these spare buttons. That's going to include the power button, the menu button, the start and select, and then also the rubber membrane connections, which are holding in the D-pad and the face buttons. Now, because the Miyoo Mini buttons don't have anything written on them, they rotate around inside of the shell. But we actually want to prevent that because we have those PlayStation icons on the buttons. And so in order to do that, we're actually going to put some double-sided tape on each of the backs of the buttons so that they stick to the rubber membrane. What you want to do is grab some tweezers and then pull off one of the sides and then stick it onto the button. And these little pieces of tape are kind of hard to work with, so just take your time and pull them off gently and then put them on the button. Altogether, it took me a few minutes just to get it right. And thankfully, there were a bunch of spares in my kit as well, and so if I messed up any of these, I could just replace them. Anyway, once you've done that, you can go ahead and start taking off the other piece of the double-sided tape and then put the button into the shell. The most important part right here is to make sure you put the right button in the right spot. And for the left and right sides, make sure you put them in the opposite side. So the circle button will be on the left one here and the square button on the right. That way when we flip the controller over, it'll be correct. Anyway, once you're ready, you can go ahead and add the rubber membrane. I would maybe wipe it off, maybe even put a little bit of alcohol in it to make sure it's not too dusty. And then from there, you just want to push them into place. Now, I already kind of lined them up when I set them inside, but they weren't quite perfect. And so here I'm taking some tweezers and just kind of rotating them a little bit so that they are nice and even. And then once you're happy with the alignment, I would switch it back over and then push them nice and hard so that they get quite stuck to the rubber membrane. And then after that, we can resume the reassembly. So I'm going to put the speaker back in that fell out here a second ago. And also this little piece fell out right here, which is part of that clear LED at the top. There's only one way to put this back in. It's pretty easy. Anyway, after that, you can put all the buttons back into place. Because none of these other buttons are labeled, it doesn't really matter what order you put them in. And so once you've replaced all the buttons and put the rubber membranes back into place, we can go ahead and reassemble the device. And again, this is exactly like we've shown earlier in the video. And so, moment of truth, here is my fully reassembled Miyoo Mini with these PlayStation buttons. And yeah, as you can tell, the quality of these buttons are much better than 3D printed ones that you'd usually see. They have a nice glossiness to them, and I'm not sure if it's showing up, but they are a little bit glittery as well. And they're perfectly sized as well. They have that same smooth glide as the stock buttons right here. And so the combination of these new face buttons and that upgraded speaker, we're 2/3 of the way through the video. And the next mod here is actually the easiest one of all. Now I also picked up these buttons from Etsy. They're from a store in San Francisco called Get Better Buttons. And these are $20 each and come in either black or white. And they also recently announced that they have new buttons for the RG353V as well. And so I'll likely be picking these up in the future too. Now my package came with this little casing here which had my buttons inside. And additionally it'll come with a little piece of sandpaper in case you need to make an adjustment to the printed buttons. So let's go ahead and start the installation. As you can imagine, we're going to take off the back cover here. Next we want to pop out the old shoulder buttons. To get these out you kind of want to leverage them up from the bottom and then pull them out of place. I found that it's easier to start with the inner buttons and then work our way out to the outer ones. And then next we're just going to snap in the new ones here. And like with pulling them apart, it's easiest to start with the inner ones and then work our way out. And then note here, the inner ones are going to be the larger buttons and they're going to be angling out towards the outside of the device. The outer buttons are also going to be angled out and away, but they're not going to be as drastic of an angle. Anyway, once you have them in place, I would recommend putting the back cover onto the machine itself, and then just kind of hold it together and test out those buttons. You should feel a pretty soft click as you press down on them. It's not going to be as robust or as loud as the stock buttons, but it should give you a little bit of a nice thunk. Now the seller of these buttons also has a full installation guide linked on their Etsy page. And in addition to showing the installation process, it also has some options here about how to tune the buttons as well. And so for this stage, you can do things like sand down the buttons if you want to have a longer travel. Personally, I didn't have any issues with the buttons as I installed them, but if you are running into any issues, I would recommend checking out this page. And yeah, honestly, these feel good. They are very quiet and soft in their click, and it does take a little bit of adjustment because it does take less pressure in order to push down the button. But I think when all is said and done, it is a nice improvement over the original. First and foremost, the buttons have a nice texture to them that just feel really easy on the hands. Additionally, it improves the ergonomics so you're not going to be straining your index finger quite so much, and it makes it very easy to discern which buttons are the triggers and which are the shoulders. Now admittedly, the original shoulder buttons on the Miyoo Mini were kind of atrocious. Generally, I didn't like using them when it came to gameplay at all, but I would use them for hotkeys. And I would say these buttons are not miracle workers. It's not going to magically make the Miyoo Mini a much more comfortable device, but it does make an improvement over a device that has very little flaws. Now my biggest bummer here is that my very favorite Miyoo Mini case does not fit with these buttons. This is the case here. I'll have it linked in the video description, and it's also made out of 3D printed materials, but it's a really nice fit. But unfortunately, with these larger size buttons, it's not going to work. Thankfully, some of the other cases that I've been using for this device work just fine. For example, that custom-made leather one that I showed off in the intro video, yeah, this one works great. And same thing with this case here, which is made for a deck of cards. I've also showed this off in previous videos. And so at the end of the day, here we are with our fully upgraded Miyoo Mini. We've got an upgraded speaker here, as well as these PlayStation style custom buttons. And of course we have these improved shoulder buttons as well. Now I would say among these 3 different upgrades here, the speaker is the one where I think it's probably not going to be worth the time and the effort. The Xperia ones do improve the sound quite a bit, but they are kind of hard to find, and honestly I don't know if it's worth that cost. However, I do think the new face buttons and the shoulder buttons are well worth your time and effort. They're definitely not the cheapest upgrades in the world. In fact, the face button kit is about half the price of the Miyoo Mini itself. But let's be honest, the reason why we're making these upgrades is because we all love our Miyoo Minis. And so if you're looking for a nice Christmas present for your favorite device of the year, then maybe this is going to be worth it to you. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.